Yeah.
Going live. What? Oh my God. I'm blowing my nose live right now.
Is it showing us everything from before?
I think so. Well, we're live and there's a 20-second delay, and I think I pressed go live after I blew my nose, and I think it just broadcast me blowing my nose to start things. So
there you go.
Welcome to me not understanding technology. We are live though, right? Can you check the comments?
We are live. I can see it there. And if somebody, there we go. Yeah, Randy. Thanks, Randy. So guys,
did I broadcast blowing my nose? Did that really just happen?
Yeah, you did. So there's a 20-second delay, everyone, from what we're recording to what's being broadcast. So we're gonna do our best to figure out how to work with the questions, but there'll be maybe some delay and some confusion a little bit because of that. But so I thought we'd start off. First of all, thanks everyone for joining us. I'm Jeff Pelletier. So yeah, everybody knows Gary Robbins, of course. We collaborated on this film together. Gary, you're out in Chilliwack. I'm in East Vancouver. And I thought we'd start by, I think a lot of people know about Chilliwack, but I thought we'd start for the people who aren't from BC or Canada for that matter. Tell us about Chilliwack. Tell us more about why you moved there.
I want to blow my nose on camera a few more times right now, actually. That's how we've set things up tonight. So Chilliwack, British Columbia is east of Vancouver, North Vancouver, by about an hour to an hour and a half, depending on traffic. It could be half a day. My wife and I lived in North Vancouver for a decade, and we were renting, and we wanted to try to buy something, and we were able to do that in Chilliwack. The reason being, really, Chilliwack cost of living is substantially cheaper than the greater Vancouver area because it's just kind of outside of the commute line that most people would commit to. So very few people in Chilliwack commute to the city, whereas the next city in, Abbotsford, has quite a few commuters in from there. So Chilliwack is right at the foot of the North Cascade Mountains. We are the closest major city to Manning Park. Some ultra runners will know Fat Dog. The Fat Dog 120 course is 60 minutes from my door. And the city has about 88 to 90,000 people. It's a relatively large city. In my adult life, I left Newfoundland when I was 19, and I moved to Banff, Alberta, then Canmore, Alberta, then Whistler, Pemberton, Squamish, North Vancouver, and then Chilliwack. So in my entire adult life, this is the second largest city I've ever lived in my entire life, period. Great mountain access, as you can see, but it has also been a little bit under the radar. Anybody from Chilliwack had this all-knowing smile on their face, and anyone not from Chilliwack really had no idea what was here. So it feels like we've kind of, we're certainly not the first to discover it, but it feels like we were in that early second wave to really understand how incredible it is here. And again, so with us getting into this house, our mortgage is cheaper than what our rent was in North Vancouver. So it's worked out well. I have the luxury of working from home 98% of the time. So that's why we are able to do this. I don't have to commute into the city save for the races that I direct. And my wife is a librarian, and her commute for her job is a little bit longer, but she was willing to make that trade-off. So, and then a fun stat, reconfirmed recently, but this has been on Wikipedia for years. Chilliwack is the warmest city in the country of Canada by average daily temperature. That is a fact, Jeff Pelletier. Really? That is a fact. Yes, I think the average daily temperature is like 12 or 13 degrees on aggregate for the year, but that's enough to make us the warmest city in the country on average daily temperature.
Nice. And the thing about Chilliwack that's so unique is you're right at the foot of some really big mountains. Like you can get into the Alpines so quickly there, which is you have to be in Squamish or really to do that. There's some huge hikes.
Is closer to what you get in Whistler and Pemberton and off the Duffy, and we have closer big mountain access than I would say Squamish does. Not by much, but for Squamish, it's still an effort to get into the big mountain stuff there.
And the only challenge I would say, as somebody who goes there all the time from Vancouver, is only certain trailheads are really accessible without a high clearance vehicle, at least, if not 4-wheel drive. But that's a small hurdle that could long-term be overcome, right? It's really
exactly. There are some trailheads that are easily accessible, and there are a handful that you need some form of an off-road vehicle. And typically, I will say this. I mean, you don't need an off-road vehicle. Your day just ends up being a little bit longer. Nothing is prohibitively far on service roads, really, but having an off-road vehicle does allow you to get right to trailheads.
Yeah, it's that extra 5 to 10 kilometer approach maybe, and then of
Yeah.
course the return. So there's an extra couple of hours. Also good ski touring, I would imagine.
Not as good as you would think, actually. We end up going up to Coca-Cola. So Coca-Cola is the high pass. If anyone, there's a Discovery Series Highway of Hell or something, that is the Coca-Cola. And that's because the Coca-Cola high point is at 1,200 meters. So it's right in that snow range. But the local access, again, as you mentioned, prohibitive on service roads. When those service roads get covered in snow, it becomes then a long approach on skis to get up on anything locally. So the ski touring in Chilliwack proper is good. But most times we go to Manning Park or the Coca-Cola.
So while we're talking about the region, there's a question here from Andrew about whether you've documented the trail somewhere. I know you have a Strava file that people can look at. Is that the best place for people to look at if they want to see more? Or do you have a blog post you're going to put together on the route that gives details? Anything else?
Yeah, that's a good question. So everything is on Strava with everything that I do. I also have all of the files on Gaia, Gaia. The Gaia app is the one that I use. It's publicly available there as well. If you're talking about this route specifically, those files are all found in those services. And then I fully intend to set up a website, a basic website with the information needed to replicate the route. And then I would like to make it something more special. I would like to encourage people to come out and try the 110, it was 108.5, 109 was the final number, to try to do it. And I'm looking to add some additional incentive to that. I don't want to go on record on anything just yet, but realistically, if you're thinking about coming out to do it at any point in time, it is 15 minutes, literally start and finish from my front door. And I would like to be associated or a part of people's attempts, certainly in the early going here next year, hopefully. And I know a few American runners just south of the border, if the border opens, are hoping to come up and maybe check it out.
And having joined you we did a big scouting mission that one day. I think we were in 40 something odd kilometers for that big loop we did. And of course I joined you on a couple other sections. I would say you don't need to go and do this whole loop, or route. There's a couple nice loops you could do that you can bite off as 40 to 50 kilometer chunks that make for just like a really good, big day. But you can do this and it's nice the way that you have it almost as 3 or 4 little loops that you could do in progression.
This is a very good point, Jeff. And exactly that. Any of those scenes that you saw that might be speaking to you, you can do just about each of them in a looping fashion in a big day, but that day would be anywhere from 30 to 50 kilometers kind of thing. So you don't need to commit to doing the whole thing or a large chunk of the thing. You could come out and just explore a section at a time. So Jeff, I want to, you were going to fire away with a question there, I think.
I was just going to ask you, somebody, I think you alluded to this, maybe not wanting to give too many details, but somebody did ask maybe a future race on that route, Hard Rock of Canada.
The route, so the route, obviously, as you saw, has some complexity to it, and it would be a manner of how to mitigate risk and manage the race safely. So the thought has gone into it for sure. I think there are some prohibitive things that we'd be up against. I'm not saying no, but it's not something we're actively working towards at this exact moment. We are actively working towards something new here next year. That is entirely different than this. That's all I'll say. And we're excited about that. And, but this is something from day one, when I saw the potential for it, thought maybe one day it could be a hard rock style race. And I think if there's a way to get it permitted and to ensure that runners could safely navigate the route, then I would have great interest in trying to make that happen.
And from what I've heard of what you just alluded to, I'm pretty excited as well. So everybody stay tuned to Gary's socials for the coming months. You mentioned did you say it's the warmest city? Linda pointed out, though, it's also the 3rd wettest. So there's that too. Yeah,
you're not supposed to say that. That's my wife just going and making it all real here. Yeah, it's also the 3rd wettest in the country. So if you want to put that in when you're thinking about the warmest city in the country, then sure.
It's like Hawaii, right?
Yeah, exactly. So Jeff, I want you to speak to the film side of things. I don't know if there's questions in the chat room specific to that.
Not yet. Does anybody have any questions specifically?
So I'm gonna start off and just so Jeff was with me on scouting sections, and obviously had a drone for a few sections and had a lot of camera materials that he had to carry with him when he was with me, both in scouting and during the run itself. How was this project for you? How much editing hit the floor? And how did you determine that the length of the film? Like, when did it go from a 20-minute film to a 40-minute film?
I'll maybe answer those starting from the end. So I think when you and I first talked about this project, Gary, I was thinking more like a 15 to 20 minute, maybe 25-minute film. I think I originally envisioned that we were going to tell the story of the route, more the process, and that the running of the route would be a part of that, but wouldn't be the whole story. But I think we talked about maybe focusing more on different trail groups and kind of more the backstory, right? And I think it became pretty evident that the story was the run itself, and that the rest of it was the parallel story, and that took on a life of its own. So obviously there's still a lot in there about the route, about your scouting, about the area, but there's a good 25 minutes extra in there that I didn't anticipate being able to tell in terms of a story that just materialized. So it just became obvious that we had a bigger story here to tell, a more emotional one.
Can you send me the first cut?
Highs and lows.
Yeah, I had no idea. When you sent me the first cut, I was like, oh, this is much longer than I thought we were looking at here.
Part of it, though, is that you're a great storyteller. So when I interviewed you, I mean, you were able to just like, that really drives it. I think everybody would agree. Like, it really, you're emotive, and you have a great memory as well for detail. But also there were twists and turns, there were ups and downs, right? There was, highs and lows that it wouldn't have been as good of a story without. So
true or false? You didn't want to include the puking footage.
No, I wanted to include the puking, although I wasn't sure how to do it without, like, it was pretty gross. Like, it's pretty graphic. We have a close-up that's like, it's like a 20-second, just like waterfall.
Yeah, even describing it makes me want to go again.
Yeah, I could bring it up now if you guys want to see it. Yeah, so I wasn't sure if you'd want me to include it. So that was, I know, and you were like, yeah, of course.
Yeah, that was just it. I mean, it's horrible, and I am a violent puker. Like I said, I think it's been 8 or 10 years. Well, no, I puked on Nolan's because of altitude, which was 4 years ago. But outside of that, like, it's been a decade since I've gotten sick like that. But it's an important part of the story because I coach athletes and I coach people through 100-milers, and I wanted people to see and to understand that, like, shit hits the fan, like, things go wrong and you can't predict when it's going to go wrong. So I thought to remove that from the film, as horrible and gross as it would compromise a part of the story of, like, no, this is kind of par for the course. When you're doing these distances, there's a lot of uncertainty around it. And like I said in the film, you get hard miles. It's a matter of when you get them.
Yeah, exactly. I think too many, I don't know about running films specifically, but I'd say just like storytelling in general on Instagram and things around running, it's all about the highs, right? It's the beautiful peaks, and you don't show the low points and just how shitty it can be sometimes, right?
Yeah.
And you go through those to get back to the high points. So, and like you say, suffering in beautiful places is what it's all about. So I ended up probably with, I don't know, somewhere around 4 to 6 hours of footage, which is a fair bit, but not that much. I tend to shoot for the edit quite a bit. So I tend to know as I'm filming how I'm going to use it when I'm building a sequence. We shot one good day scouting where we got a lot of the drone footage, and then the rest of it was pretty much all done live. Like, there was nothing staged. A couple of drone shots were from before again, but even some of the drone shots going through the boulder fields, that was all from the day.
I mean, it's fair to say I would have been 6-7 hours faster without having to film on the day.
Minutes, hours,
hours. It was, so during the outing, when we were going up our second climb on Slessy, I got something in my eye here, on Slessy, that was the one, like, the only time in the entire run that I actually felt truly strong. On that climb, I was making good time, and I felt horrible, but I turned around and you had all your gear and you were off the back a little bit. And that was the only time the entire run where I was like, oh, I'm actually not moving that bad right now.
I sensed that I was holding you guys back, and I think I even expressed it at one point. And I remember feeling like, I think I went up too hard this morning, because earlier that morning when I chased you up the first climb, and thanks, Andrew, you pointed out that cinematography there you liked from the lake to that first pass. I mean, to get a lot of the shots, I'm kind of not running.
Oh yeah, like you're like
sprinting up the hill.
Yeah.
And I got to hold my breath so that I can, you don't hear me. And then I'm filming Gary, then I'm sprinting again, and doing that for sort of 25-30K, and then getting a short break and then going back out. That caught up with me during that Slessy section for sure. And I felt like I was really dragging on that.
Section, I wouldn't say you were holding us back by any stretch. You actually made me feel better about myself. So thanks for that. But what I liked about getting that drone shot, so seeing it afterwards, that's the one that comes out and you've got all the big talus slope rocks that unfold in the image. is it was nice. It was 25 degrees or something. And while we had to wait for Jeff to land the drone and pack it up, I laid down in the heather for like 10, 12 minutes and basically took a quick nap, and it was super lovely, actually.
Yeah, those micro naps are great, hey, during
Yeah.
big efforts. Yeah. So there was, actually, Andy, you had a question here, which I'll pull back the curtain. There was one shot that was a stage shot, which is the jumping in the water at the end. So that was, I had Gary recreate that with, I said, here, now take the GoPro and jump again. I want to get a shot of you underwater. But other than that, nothing was staged. From what you saw, it was all done in the day. And I was worried I wouldn't be able to keep up with you at the end there for that sprint finish. That was a good effort. That was,
at that point, I didn't care if I dropped anybody. I was just like,
yeah.
I'm getting this done. I was confident you were going to be okay there.
I could tell. And so I'll just kind of talk about what I filmed with. I had most of it was filmed just on a little GoPro Hero 8. So this is like last year's model. It's got really good stabilization, and this would be basically anything you saw in the Alpine. I didn't carry a big camera. It's just too hard to do what I was saying, like trying to keep up, and even just not using my poles because I'm holding a camera while Gary is using his poles puts me at a disadvantage. So forget the weight of the camera, just the fact that I can't use my hands. So it was mostly filmed on this, and if you know how to set it, like the settings, you can get pretty good footage that you can then color grade and do everything you need to make it look good. So I was pretty happy with how that turned out. I've since upgraded to the GoPro 9, but it's not drastically different. So I would say if anybody wants to get some good footage, the 8 or the 9 are good. The stabilization is amazing.
With their knowledge of GoPros, how impressive it was that you were able to get that footage off of the camera and grade it out afterwards.
Thanks. Yeah, it's all about getting it like down to a really flat profile, really flat colors and lower sharpness and things.
So my scouting footage, this is the brand new, I just got this last, I think a week ago, the 1X2 Insta360, but that footage where you can see me talking about the line on crossover, you can see the line on the camera from the 360. It didn't stitch entirely properly, which is rare. But anyways, this is the camera that I've been using for all of my personal stuff when I'm out there. And what I like about the 360 camera in particular is you just put it on a stick or wherever you want to hold it, and it shoots a globe, and then you just edit afterwards in the app. You press a button and you just move your camera and then select what you want to produce from it. So you don't have to think about what you're producing like you do as a filmmaker like Jeff does. Yeah,
that's definitely, I'm actually thinking about getting one of those just for some cool interstitial shots. Like I think it'd be a neat thing to incorporate.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. There was a question about whether, are we going to submit this to a film festival? I don't know. Should we submit this to Banff Film Festival maybe?
I thought my understanding of submitting to film festivals is that you're not allowed to do this, release it on YouTube first. It has to be exclusive. And I initially thought like, oh, maybe, but certainly if we can also do that, there's no reason we wouldn't. But I didn't want to delay the film. I thought this is the right time to do it. It's 2020. And I wanted to tell this story now. I didn't want to have to wait a few months if that was the case for any kind of restrictions with film festival stuff. I would love to see it, but again, I don't think you can do both. So
yeah, and I didn't mention it either because if we're going to do a virtual online film festival, then why not just do it this way, right? It's kind of the same in a way. So
right.
Yeah. Biggest logistical issue for shooting the film. I think the biggest challenge with these, and there's no way to do it for the ones that are done on the day where we're capturing, you need to be filming the actual run to capture the emotion. But to be honest, most of the films you see, the shorter films that are really well produced, that are like FKTs and things, they're usually recreations.
Right.
That's just how they do it. I remember seeing a great film years ago of Uli Steck and doing, I think it was his Eiger speed record, and there's shots of him being filmed, and then there's a drone shot and there's no camera person. I mean, that's just all done after the fact. It's tough when you're trying to do it on the day.
Absolutely. So two things. When you read a comment, I think you should include the name or the handle just so we get it.
Yeah, sorry, that was Andrew asking about that. Thanks, Andrew.
And that's a really good point to make here is that, yeah, I think it's a testament to Jeff's unique ability to not only create and make a film, but his physical attributes to be able to be out there in the environment with you. You're like the Jimmy Chin of ultra running. You just get there and you're hanging off the ropes. You're right in people's faces. And like most people couldn't do what you do. They can do one or the other. So the fact that you can do both allowed us to make a very unique film in that regard. There wouldn't be a lot of other films that would really just, almost entirely be from the day itself.
The hardest thing I ever did was chase you up a 14,000 footer in Colorado the morning after arriving off my flight from Vancouver.
That was
Literally,
Jared's
I arrived at the trailhead, and Gary's been preparing for 3 weeks at altitude, and here I am. I literally had to chase him up 14er with like 8 hours at altitude. So yeah. But no, I mean, that is the biggest challenge. I think, you know, we even talked about that during the Scout, where even the Scout, there was no time thing, but we were doing a big day. And I did at that point have my larger camera. I shot on a mirrorless, and I had my little drone, but it's still, you know, with batteries and things.
How does that mirrorless sound when it's bouncing off rocks?
Yeah. We won't talk about that. And so I had, you know, even when we're not racing, it's just carrying gear for that distance. Like the way to do it would have been to simply go up for those shots and stage it and take our time. But sometimes it's just not possible. Like it's not as authentic.
And because the scouting was so continuous right up until a week out, there was no ability to go somewhere I knew and go back again. It was constantly trying to establish what was going to happen.
And the weather's constantly changing too, right?
So that the first pass, as we're coming down off of Lindeman, there's that tree kind of down climb, and I'm pointing to the little notch that we have to go through. So we get through the notch. There's a little bit of snow that day, and we stop on the side, and Jeff takes that camera and he places it down. It's in the case, right? Yeah. And it just started rolling, and it went like 15 meters. And if it went 2-3 more meters, it was gone. And it just,
there was a cliff.
Like, please stop, please stop, please stop. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah. And it just sat there.
yeah. We got pretty lucky. Yeah. Okay, let's jump back to some questions here. So GoPros are handy, but not great for post work. It's mostly it's the low light that GoPros do a poor job in. But you know, my philosophy is always the best camera is the one you have on you. And sometimes in the case of a GoPro, it's the one that's the simplest. Like if I'm huffing and puffing and, this would be great, I need to be able to pull it out, hit record, get a shot, put it away and keep moving, you know, like just within a matter of seconds. So I think sometimes it's a matter of like getting the shot versus not getting the shot. That's what GoPros are good for. So I'm increasingly trying to supplement that footage now with drones, with better cameras for the before and after stuff to try to add a bit of production value. And then with some graphics and maps and things as well. Well, let me jump back into asking you some questions here, Gary. So what about timing for a normal runner? Craig is wondering, for a normal runner like him, Craig Frizzle, so you know him.
Oh yeah, hey Frizz.
So what would be your best guess for timing on a route like this?
That's a good question.
Sorry, also tell us both supported versus unsupported. Can you even do this route unsupported?
You certainly could. Yeah, there's lots, like those access points that we had are all you could, you know, if you had I don't even think you need a high clearance. Like, again, like we said, it's kind of these things that could be loops the way that you go up and down through the mountains. You could, you don't want to stash food with animals and bears and stuff, but like you could self-support for sure. I've thought about that. Yeah. You saw there was very little running in the footage, and there was very little running in the attempt, to be honest. You know, whether it was because it's so steep up, because it's so rocky and technical down, because it's overgrown in sections, because it's off trail mountain stuff. So the running I did was a small percentage of this. I would say the only thing that would differentiate me from an average runner is the consistency with the climbs. I don't think the traversing or the descending, like we weren't really running down. Even McFarlane, I was really taking my time. It's a 2,000 meter descent, and I didn't want to blow my legs out. So I know that like that route could go under 30 hours pretty comfortably by someone who knew what they were doing. I think a 48-hour window is a good thing to be working with. And I want this to be along the lines of like Jared Campbell has the Whirl in Salt Lake City. I don't think it's as hefty as Nolan's kind of thing, but you know, that's a 60-hour kind of thing. So I think a 48 range is fair, but again, I don't think someone like Craig is very experienced. I don't think you'd be as slow as you think comparatively.
I would throw out there the option of fast packing it. So doing big days and then camping in the evening, and then you could even camp low if you wanted to down on the road. And that would be a way to do it over maybe the course of 3 or 4 days. You know,
I think if you fast pack 2 nights, not only like you'd also get to really enjoy everything out there, right? It's so magnificent. You don't McFarlane is glorious. Like it's such a beautiful summit. And it was 11 PM. In my retelling, I thought it was midnight, but either way, it was in the dark and you don't get to see that. So I I went around Mont Blanc, UTMB, in 4 days, 3 nights, because I wanted to see the entire route in the daylight. And same thing with with UTMB. You miss the greatest parts of that run by headlamp. So I think doing fast pack 3 days, 2 nights is the best way to think about doing something like this. And there's lots of areas to camp. And Chilliwack backcountry is very camping friendly. Like there's always people out there camping. It's a very established thing.
How does this compare to, Greg Irving asks this, how does it compare to Hurt or any other big runs that you've done?
Hey, Greg. The difference being the lack of trail and technicality and lack of running. Like I really look at this and even when I'm watching the film, it's just like, did I run it all out there in the entire thing? Like, and on a few of the times when I could run, I was feeling too terrible from having gotten sick to be able to capitalize on it. You know, Hurt is like a race and it's go, and there's other people, there's competitors, there's aid stations. So the Hurt race, even my best run there, certainly took more out of me than this did. But even if I treated this as a race scenario, it would be tough to bring it close to 24-hour range. Like I know it'll go under 30, but 24-hour would be pretty exceptional. So the amount of off trail, and again, it's so easy in all of those rocky areas to really hurt yourself. And I didn't want to become a liability. I don't want to be calling search and rescue because I'm doing this weird project on my own. So it's good to have some form of support if you're thinking about doing it as well.
There was a question earlier here. I'll try to find who asked this again, but how much of this would you estimate was off trails or roads? Like, what do you think? There was a lot of service road, there's a lot of trail. Maybe you can talk both in terms of time on feet and distance, because those two things will be different.
Yeah, that's gonna be a tough one to answer. I'll try to talk my way through it. So the first 50K is basically an established Trans-Canada Trail is what it's called, and that's all trail the whole way up. We punched out onto the shoulder of the paved road for the last 6 miles, 10K, because I wanted to differentiate the route. I didn't want to have overlap. And then it's a trail all the way to the sunrise. That's a trail up to the shoulder of Webb. It's off trail from there down and back out again. So that stretch through is what, 6 miles, I think, about off trail. You're on service road for the next 5 miles. And then you're on trail to the Alpine. It's off trail again for another 4 miles, trail, service road. So I would say off trail in the range of 10 to 15 miles. And I would say service road in the range of 5, 10, 15 to 20 miles. And then the rest would be trail. I think that's about, yeah, in that range.
But of course, you're spending a disproportionate amount of time on the off-trail stuff because there's navigation, there's complex terrain. So it doesn't feel like, it feels like you're spending most of your time really out there. And it's almost like, oh, thank God I can turn over the legs a little bit for an hour.
You know, Hard Rock 100, which we both know, and anyone who hasn't been there doesn't, there's a ton of service roads in Hard Rock, but that's not the story. And it's not the experience. As you just said, you spend a limited amount of time covering a lot of distance comparatively on service roads, and you spend a maximum amount of time moving really slow in alpine terrain on this route and in Hard Rock. But Hard Rock has, what is it, like 30 miles of service road?
It's a lot. It's a lot.
Like way more than you would think. And I think that's why this route really is comparative without the altitude issues to a Hard Rock style race. I think even some of the terrain mimics the San Juans for me. And I said that the first time I ever saw it, when I'm looking up at the crossover pass and you can see the 2 spires and the slope with the waterfall. I mean, in summer, that's popping green, and that says San Juans to me every time I see it.
I would agree. And even, I'm even picturing a race happening on that course. The aid stations would be similarly challenging to get to. It's very much like Hard Rock, just minus the altitude.
Yeah, Kroger's Canteen aid station. And yeah, exactly.
A couple of questions here that I can probably quickly answer. There's questions around wildlife. Sean M specifically asks, when we were hay bearing in that one shot, had we seen anything? We hadn't at that time. I included that to show that we're constantly doing that when we're bushwhacking, and when we're into brushy terrain, when we're going into a ravine like that, or any kind of gully, or just we're constantly yelling hey bear and So I just made sure to include that one instance, but we hadn't actually seen anything specifically then.
But
But did you see
Yeah.
any wildlife at all? Yeah.
Well, no, what I was going to say, when we did that route on the Scout for the 40K, we had a bear. We just kind of like heard and saw a bear. We didn't like come straight up against it. And then I was in there a third time and there was fresh scat everywhere. So I know for like, there's bears in that region.
Yeah.
So yeah, as Jeff said, it was us displaying that we're doing that frequently. And then in terms of bear safety, so the North Cascades do have grizzly. They are not known to be specifically in the range that we were operating in. Black bear are common. This year, I think I saw 12 black bears. And typically black bears are pretty docile. You stand your ground, you make noise, you give them space. I carry bear spray, bangers, actually an air horn more than bangers. And I'm prepared for bear encounters. But as long as it's a black bear, it is incredibly rare to have any issue with a black bear, even with cubs, as long as you're making noise and you give it lots of space. Grizzly, on the other hand, entirely different scenario. Truly one of the things that scares the life out of me to think about. If you have a grizzly encounter, and certainly a sudden encounter, you better have bear spray and you better hope that it works.
And it needs to be handy, not packed away in your bag.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. Yeah. Exactly. It has to be readily available. So anytime I'm in grizzly possible terrain, the bear spray is in a front water pocket.
Linda reminds us as well, there are cougars in the area that are common, although in my experience, cougars tend to not want much to do with adults, large adults. If they might mistake you for a smaller animal, but they maybe don't quite pose the same threat.
I am much more acutely aware of the potential for cougars when I'm hiking with my son, because he's 5 years old, and that is a true possibility for a cougar, or my dog, right? If my dog is out there, those are the targets that a cougar would go after. Grown adults, multiple, you're not going to have a cougar encounter unless, there was the mountain bike issue in Washington State a couple of years ago, and that was an emaciated cougar that was basically on the verge of death and attacked two mountain bikers as a last resort. But historically, in all the years I've been here, 20 years of doing this, I've never once come across a cougar on the trails.
While we're talking about safety, it's probably worth, of course, reminding people, we are obviously carrying all the essentials with us, first aid, headlamps, but especially during our initial scouting, where we were going up higher and bagging peaks, we had helmets for those final scrambles, we had ice axes, and we knew how to use all that gear. So there are sections within this that you do need to know how to negotiate.
Time of year, especially. And that's a good point. I wanted to point that out. So in the video, if you're paying attention, you can see that Sam drove when we're going up Slessie, has a massive backpack on. And then Anne-Marie also has a large pack when she's departing. And I wanted to establish that they weren't actually carrying any of the supplies I was using. They were carrying emergency supplies. So we had a full backup kit. We had an in-reach, we had backup food and emergency supplies just in case, but not once did I tap into that. That was a just in case. And then Sam's pack is so big because I couldn't effectively attach my helmet to my bag for the Slessie crossover crossing. So the only piece of gear that was carried by someone else for me was my helmet was carried by Sam when it wasn't on my head.
John, to answer your question, this camera that I had used, it's sort of an older camera I have. It's the Sony A7S II. So it's an older mirrorless camera, which there's newer models that are have since replaced it. But yeah.
A newer one would have had more spring in it, and it really would have bounced off the slope. So you're lucky you have the older version.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And then the drone, if anybody cares, this is an older, this is a Mavic Air. There's now a Mavic Air 2, and there's actually an even smaller version out that just came out. But yeah, these drones are great. They're nice and light. And you can't fly around Chilliwack Lake Provincial Park, but we were right on the boundary, right just past the boundary in those opening shots. And the other couple shots, we were outside of the provincial park boundaries. So yeah, follow those rules. Don't ruin it for the rest of us. Gary, there's some questions that maybe we can get into a little bit more, just you in general. I'd love to talk about your foot if you're comfortable just mentioning a little bit more about that. Yeah. I chose not to really focus on that in the film because that could have been its own. I didn't want to make this all about that injury because the injury didn't hold you back here. It did maybe for an hour. There was a point that we talked about there where you had this taped solution that started coming apart. But once you solved that, you were back. So we didn't want to focus on that too much, but maybe you can talk about that a little bit. And more generally, there's some questions. Craig is wondering just how much time do you spend just on maintenance now that you're in your 40s? And, I know you focus a lot on strength work. You have a big gym at home. So maybe you can talk about that.
Oh, that's a great question. Actually, I'm glad you brought both of them up. So I won't bore you with the full details of the foot. The most condensed version I can think of is for 6 years now, it's 5 years before I figured it out. My left foot, I injured it at mile 90 at the Hurt 100, and I continued to the finish, and because I was leading the race, so I wasn't going to drop. And then after the race, I couldn't walk properly for days. And essentially over a period of 5 years, it's on my left foot, and I kind of almost not broke, but really altered this toe permanently. And my body's way of compensating for the pain in my foot was to start spreading my toes out. So I went from a normal D width to a 4E width over a period of 4.5 years. And essentially I had a major injury that my body was overcompensating for. And you can only do that for so long. And then I started getting stress fractures. So I had a stress fracture in the neck of my femur. I had a iliac bone stress reaction, and I had a sacrum stress fracture. And what was happening is, first and foremost, my right foot is normal and my left foot is doing this. And then when my feet are hitting the ground, my arch is collapsing incorrectly, and just slightly, my left hip is dropping. And that was creating stress forces on the left side of my body. So I saw a specialist, an expert. He assessed things, said that this toe extends too far up, and the pain is from the bone going down into the tendon ligament below. And there was nothing that he could do about this. There was no known solution, no surgery, nothing was going to fix it. This was November of 1 year ago. And he then told me that I was old and it was time to find something else to do with my free time. So I drove home from New Westminster, which was an hour and change, and got home and started trying to source solutions for this. So once I understood what the cause was, because all I knew is it was spreading out, but I didn't know that it was over flexing. Basically, I thought, what if I tape this toe to this one and then support it, and not directly to it, but tape it so it can't, tape it like that so it can't do what it's not supposed to do. So for a calendar year, my toe is taped. It's taped. I'm not going to put my toe on camera. It's taped right now. And as long as that toe is taped and it has a normal average gap between my toes, my foot has proper biomechanical alignment. And this, combined with a strength program through my hip core complex, brought the strength back and brought me back in line. And now I can actually run properly. So this is the longest I had been able to test this theory of will this continue to work? And the issue we had was the tape warmed up in the sleeping bag, and then my pinky toe stuck to this toe. So my foot was hitting the ground like a brick. And then that started creating this pain. And I was like, this is it, I'm done. And then when we finally determined it, we pulled this off, retaped this, everything went back to normal. And I'm held together with basically, it's Leukotape, but I say duct tape as a joke. Leukotape holds up well. So tying into the strength work, I saw a strength and conditioning coach, coincidentally was my first ever running coach, who lived in Whistler in 2004. She did an alignment, an analysis, saw the deficiency, saw the collapsing on the left side, prescribed a program for me: core, hip, hamstring, lower body complex. I did that literally 3 hours ago. And I have to do it at least once every 7 days. I've been doing that for 1.5 years. And, I haven't had any issues since. So, but the second my toe is on taped, it goes right back to that pain response. So, but I figured it out. It all seems to be working. And I'm very happy with having a solid year injury free and feeling as strong as I've felt in many years. And then recovery, strength, older, 44 now, getting up there. There's gray in here somewhere. They're starting to unfold. Recovery is a big part of it. I coach athletes, and anyone in their 20s and 30s doesn't know what's about to happen in their late 30s, early 40s. And it really does change. 5 years, I've noticed a significant change in my ability to recover and my ability to just bury myself and just go and go and go. So I've had to accept training smarter, not harder. And I call it homework. The aging athlete has more homework than the younger athlete. Younger athletes can be completely reckless and just kind of do what they want to do. And you don't even need 8 hours of sleep and you recover. If I don't get 8 hours of sleep, I can barely function now. And I have this stick rolling device. I have to hit my calves and peroneals with that for 5 minutes every day, especially with the speed training I'm doing right now. And then when I'm doing the core complex in the gym, I'm also doing a stretching routine in there as well. So things that are very normal and common for me now, 5 years ago, I never had to think about.
Yep, here. I have to keep relearning that lesson myself about the importance of strength training.
Hamstring screen.
Hamstring for me, that's what I'm dealing with right now. Andy H is wondering about, was there anything specific that we were worried about with the helmets, like any rock fall or dodgy climbing, or was it, why were we carrying the helmets?
That's a good question. So the only concern was overhead, and there's nothing. So when you kind of see us getting hooked up on the slab and there's snow below us, that's a glacier. And then you've got this pocket glacier that's receded off the granite. And that granite, is, if it's wet at all, is glass. It's a nightmare. You couldn't do this route and that crossing on a wet day. It would be impossibly dangerous. But as you go through the next pass, the upper remaining part of the pocket glacier exists. And the helmets are in the off chance that in August under sun, something off of that glacier or rocks that are melting out of that glacier come down that slope. So it's very unlikely that you'll come up against anything, like, you know, I would say less than 1% chance, but in that off chance, you want heads break and it doesn't go well. So that was the concern. Slight overhead concern from a pocket glacier that could calve some rocks or a little bit of snow on us.
And I think we did carry them even on the scouting day on McDonald and Lindeman, just for in case one of us kicked a rock or two, like a small rock even. So just when you're scrambling in groups, it's just good practice to have a helmet.
Absolutely.
Just for the
Good point with that, exactly.
Yeah, and Scott McIntyre's he added to that. I think really you answered his question, which was Schlessie to McFarland the most complex scrambling section, and I think that it pretty much was. It was Schlessie under crossover and over to McFarland was the most complex. That was the crux of the entire route. Exactly.
That's the crux of the route. That is what needed to be done under daylight hours. There's nothing severe about it. That down climb, you know, you kind of do the lobster crab. What is that? Lobster walk? Crab walk.
Crab
You
walk.
kind of do the crab walk down a little and you just cautious through there. There's nothing super complex about it. It's not like scramble holds and hand holds and exposure, but you need to know the line. You could get yourself into trouble really quickly if you dropped into the wrong area. But if you went out and day scouted it, you would get a good sense of it pretty quickly. And then again, the reminder that snow is glacial. So the first time I scouted it, I stepped out on the snow, thought it was just like everything else that we had through Lindeman and stuff, which is seasonal receding snow. And there was a kind of a depression in the snow. And when I walked up to it, it was a rock, and the rock heats up in the sun every day. And it was like 2.5 meters down. And at that point, I realized I was standing on a glacier, not snow. And I had that moment of like, oh shit, okay. Light steps, like, let's get off of this. This is, 3-4 meters deep right now. It was solid, but it was that moment of like, if anything happens, this is not 6 inches of snow. It's like 10 feet of snow.
So we've had a few questions from a few different people here, basically asking the same thing. What's next, Gary? I don't know if you want to talk about, if you have anything to talk about, if you want to talk about when you're going to talk about it.
So what's next? The border with the USA is closed and remains closed. If the border wasn't closed, I'd be talking more about possibly Barkley. But right now, that's not possible. So I'm not talking about it, and I'm not specifically focusing on it, to be honest. I'm focusing on what I have in front of me, which is I'm doing some speed training. I'm training for a 10K time trial right now. And one of the reasons I'm doing this is because that foot injury I had for 5 years didn't allow me to run flat. It was most painful with a heel to toe running motion. I could go uphill and downhill with little pain. I could not run flat for 20 minutes without feeling completely crippled. So since I figured that out, I've now wanted to focus on recapturing speed. So I'm working with Rob Watson, and I'm training for a 10K time trial on 3 weeks. I'm really enjoying that process. I feel like I'm recapturing fitness that's been missing for a little bit. Barkley is potential. Can't say guarantee one way or the other. And I want to line up for a 100-miler next summer. I want to compete with a bib on at a 100-miler if at all possible. And I would like to do that close to home. So I will see what those options are. But, and outside of that, I have some more mountain projects that I would love to do. That what we just presented is incredible, but you look out at other incredible landscape, which is literally just on the other side of the valley. And when I first moved to Chilliwack, that idea was on a back burner, and the initial idea was something on the other side. So now I want to focus my attention kind of on that side next year and see what I can link up from there. And that's the craziest thing about living here, is I just spent an entire summer doing this incredible exploration of this phenomenal area. And I don't even need to repeat any of it next year. I can go to the other side of that Chilliwack River Valley and spend the entire summer exploring all of this other stuff that's there. So I feel kind of spoiled with what we've got access to here.
Drew is asking me whether I rely on Red Bull or Mountain Dew to keep up with Gary. Neither, just Cliff Bar gels and blocks, nothing but.
Who's got a Cliff Bar sponsorship?
Yeah, I know. I actually do. Caffeine helps. Caffeine helps. There's another question here. I actually don't know who this. The handle is bee climbing. I don't know what the person's name is. What about doing some ski touring? Maybe filming some ski touring together. And there's another question as well from somebody from Lucien. What about some big ski traverses? Anything planned in your future for that? Because you've been doing a lot more skiing, Gary.
Yeah, so my goal this year is to get at least 20 days backcountry on skis. I'll be heading out again tomorrow, assuming plans haven't changed since I've been on the last couple of hours. That'll be day 6, I think, on skis right now. A couple of years back, I ended up with over 30 backcountry days, and that was like the most fun winter I'd had in years. And unfortunately, that's the one thing that Barkley has taken from me, is especially last year, because I had been injured for a year and a half with these stress fractures. I had a very small window of time, literally from the middle of November until Barkley Day to get prepped. So I needed to go all in on running, but I've had this year. So I'm very confident in my base fitness right now. And I know that I don't need to overcook myself on repeats and stuff. I'm going to enjoy being out on skis. The big ski traverses. My stuff for that has to be day projects. It's a lot in and of itself, you know. Even like if I go ski touring for 5 hours, it's like a 7 or 8 hour day. It's a full day versus the running side of things. So it doesn't create stress or strain with family, but it does mean I'm away for that day, and being away for multiple days would be challenging for sure. Most of my touring partners are fathers or parents as well. And that's kind of our goal, is to get out and have a solid workout and have a lot of fun skiing powder. And there are some traverses I would love to do, but nothing is on the calendar right now.
And as far as making a film, my hands get too cold. I don't know how people film in the winter, like ski films. I don't know. Follow-up question from Lucien. I think I'll know the answer to this. Coquihalla or Duffy?
So Duffy has the way better terrain. I mean, 100% Duffy. I mean, so when I was living in North Vancouver, I had ski days going up towards Lillooet where I drove more than I skied to get up into that terrain. And certainly from Chilliwack, I mean, it's not happening. I'm not doing a day trip up to the Duffy. I'd end up having to stay with friends in Squamish or something. Yeah, the access to terrain off the Duffy is definitely primo, but busy. And I think it's going to be uber busy this season, especially now with everybody out for the holidays. So the benefit that Coquihalla has is certainly busy, but it's a weekday thing for me most times. Skiing a Saturday is rare. Normally I try a Monday, Friday kind of mix to stay away from the crowds.
But the Coke has great access as well to a few peaks right off the highway. And yeah,
day, the scenery from up there is phenomenal. Like zero complaints about what we've got access to, what's considered our backdoor backcountry. But yeah, if you're actually asking for a picking of one, the terrain up off the Duffy gets up into some really cool 2,500 meter peaks that get some really fun couloir skiing and some good adventure stuff.
Well, I think that's most of the questions. Does anybody else have any other questions, whether it be about the run itself or about the film? Or
well, this already went longer than I thought it would.
It did, yeah.
Anybody tuned in, let alone for this long. So we'll take one more question if someone fires away. And
well, I think people are curious about the this near miss you had recently, Gary. You and I haven't even had a chance to talk about this.
Yeah. So it got a lot more traction than I think it should have. Sometimes headers can be clickbait-ish. I was interviewed for the radio and an article was published, and the accuracy of the article and the interview obviously was there, but I didn't nearly die. I could have if everything had gone wrong. So, today is Friday, and 8 days ago on Wednesday, I was training doing my flat interval running. And in Chilliwack here, there's a farming area which has perfect flat pavement. I've been training down there for a month, 1 or 2 days a week. I've probably run 10 to 12 hours. The only shortcoming is that the shoulder of the road has a half lane, a half bike lane, not a full bike lane, but it's a solid stripe. And I run against traffic, and I've never had an issue. Everybody's super respectful. Most people get all the way over on the other side. You know, it's like not even a concern. And 8 days ago, I was running on something called Prairie Central Road, and this big truck is towing a trailer, and everything's happening very quickly. I'm in the middle of an interval. I'm running a 5:35 pace mile. That's my maximum in an interval. And you're not processing as much, but I see this truck, and the trailer is being towed down the middle of this small bike lane shoulder that I'm in. And I think, well, this guy just hasn't seen me yet. So I look up, and I'm waiting for this guy to respond and swerve or move. And he looks right at me and continues to drag the trailer right down the lane that I'm running in. So I ended up having to jump out of the way. And when I did, I slipped on mud off the side of the road. And I went from running, a 5:35 pace to a full stop on my hip on pavement. And then just ended up with road rash on my hip, my thigh, my shin, and ended up with a bit of a swollen ankle. And adrenaline, I popped back up immediately. I jumped out in the middle of the road. I just threw my arms up, just being like, what the heck was that? And I was encouraged to file a police report in case this person had a history of doing similar things, and you can establish a pattern or something. So I did. And how did it get out? I think Linda posted about it. And then someone saw that, and it got traction from there.
Yeah.
I had a swollen ankle for a couple of days. I had a bruise on my foot for a week. I didn't miss, other than that workout, I didn't miss really anything else. Could have been a lot worse. It wasn't. I had a good download session with my wife, and I was able to kind of compartmentalize it and not allow 1% to ruin the 99% of amazing. And a really fun story is a few hours ago, this guy locally, his name is Gary. I just met him for the first time. He saw that this had happened. He reached out to me. He has a beard. He has a beard oil company, and he offered me some free beard oil. And I said, I don't actually use beard oil, but I really appreciate the sentiment. And he said, listen, he's been here for his whole life, and he just wanted to extend, goodwill after having experienced something like that. And I thought that was really quite special. And Linda, said earlier, it's almost like we've had a closer connection with our community through this one D-bag that pulled this off. So this place is amazing. And no matter where you go in the world, you're going to come up against, and it's a weird year. A lot of people are going through a lot of weird things right now. So I can't say that this is normal behavior. I certainly hope not on a regular, but yeah, it's led to some positives. And again, thanks to this other Gary who dropped off some beard oil for me today to basically say, like, there's really good people here. So.
Yeah. No, it's a reminder too. This is one of the reasons we run trails. It's running on roads isn't the safest, whether you're on a bike, no matter where you are. You have to be aware of what's happening, and maybe have one earbud out, and kind of just be aware of what's happening around you. But glad that you're okay.
Yeah. And I have long now considered road biking to be the most dangerous sport. I have a road bike, and it hasn't left my Zwift trainer in a year and a half. I got a gravel bike, and I immediately was like, I don't know if I'll ever ride roads again. I only felt slightly comfortable riding roads in groups. I used to be in North Vancouver with Steed Cycles. And even on a group ride with Steed Cycles, we were out in Port Moody on a ride one day, and there was 12 of us in a bike lane, and some truck came along and hit the horn and swerved at us. And it's like a group of 12 grown men on bikes. And it's just mind boggling, the mentality of some. And it all happens too quickly. You don't win against a metallic machine like that. So I'm going to be back on the trail sooner than later, but I got back to Prairie Central for a workout yesterday. And then I just decided to capitalize on the side roads and keep myself a little bit more insulated from another potential incident.
Let's bring this back around something a little more positive. How can people, where should people go to learn more about Chilliwack in general? What books, what resources? Somebody even said maybe you should write a book on some of the local trails, right? So wait, are there, I haven't seen any Chilliwack specific trail running books yet, or hiking books for that matter. Although there are a lot of the more common ones, I guess, would be in some of the more popular books, right?
Correct. Yeah. I I can't say that I haven't had the thought that that person had mentioned in the comments, and I appreciate that. And if I didn't have 12 things going on at the same time, that would be higher on my potential to-do list. But there isn't a lot. So that map that we mentioned, which it is funny, it says do not post to the web, but we only posted the image of that. That was supposed to be renewed with a brand new edition this year, but it got pushed back multiple times. I don't know if it's been produced yet, but it's getting a refresh at any point. So that'll be nice to see the updates on there. And other than that, it's a lot of information came off of Trail Forks and Gaia, other users that are out there, and seeing what they're doing basically. So it hasn't, there's not like a be all and end all. It's difficult to find, but yeah, the online GPS services, Trail Forks in particular, provided me with insight into moto access and different trails that you won't find otherwise.
Yeah, great mountain biking out there, from what I hear.
Yep. Absolutely. Hundreds of
yeah.
kilometers of mountain bike trails, great mountain biking community out here. BC Bike Race is doing their stage 1 in Chilliwack next year, which is a big damn deal. And then Jeff right there. Yeah. Some of those hiking books.
I don't know. Is this backwards for you guys? I'm not sure if I have it mirrored just on mine. Okay. So this 103 hikes, I just checked. There's a good dozen or so hikes in here. So some of the more popular ones like McFarlane, and then Matt Gunn's Scrambles books will have,
right there.
That'll have a few more of probably, I'd imagine, like McDonald's.
That Scrambles book is literally the reason we live here. That Scrambles book is what brought me to Chilliwack for the first time ever in 2014. You go in there, there's 12 Scrambles, and they're all off of Chilliwack Valley Road. And I couldn't believe what I was reading and seeing, and I came out to see it for myself. And that is everything from that day has led to this moment from Matt Gunn's book.
Can you show us Cruz? Everybody wants to see Cruz. I do too.
She is not, she doesn't love being picked up, and yeah, she she likes to make noise. She's my office buddy. She sits on my lap when she's happy, but right now she wants more attention than I can give her. But yeah, I think this has been like, thank you so much to everybody for tuning in. I'm amazed that we had a good launch, good uptake, and most impressively to me, most surprisingly, that we did this and have gone for what, 50, almost an hour.
Yeah, almost an hour. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for the interest. Thanks for the questions. Thanks for the support. And I wish everybody a happy holidays, and hope that Santa's good to you guys, and that we can all get back to some hugs and high fives at some point in late 2020, 2021.
Yeah, 2021, me as well. Thanks everyone. Thanks for tuning in, and for all the great questions. And Gary, I'll talk to you soon.
All right, I'm going to hit stop, and then I'm going to pick my nose and see if it gets broadcast live.
Yeah. Okay, deal.